Hello, everyone, and welcome to our fourth episode of the American Scouser TV Fantasy Premier League show. So I am joined with Mateusz. Some weeks he is in the sunshine from the skylight. Some weeks he is in the dark with the newspapers. But tonight he's
Never
repping
know.
his Liverpool red, which is always great. Mateusz, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. I'm kind of hiding in the dark a little bit from the disaster of Gameweek One. So it's kind of the inspiration behind today's look.
Was not the easiest of matches. It was not easy for the template player. And I think as we get further into this program, we will realize that we were both template players this week. But first, before we get going, I want to start by reminding everyone about the American Scouser Cup. The league entry is still open. And some people might be saying to themselves, why would I join a league now? The odds of winning one of these leagues is very rare, anyways. We're going to be following all season long. It allows you to play along with other Liverpool supporters and hopefully other American Scouser supporters as well. The banter will be good, and we will make sure that we're kind of giving monthly updates as well. So you may join week 3 and still win three of the next 5 months, which is an accomplishment in itself, and we're going to make sure try to highlight some of those and maybe even come up with some contests. So throughout the program, we will make sure to continue to throw at you the code, and if you would like to, make sure to just log in and manually join by typing in the code that is showing at the bottom of the screen now. So week 1 is in the books, my friend. So what better way to start the American Scouser Cup than to take a look at the actual leaderboard? And at this point, we've seen a lot so far. We know that there were a few of our friends, as Jamie let us know. Anyone who listens to the American Scouser podcast knows Irish Jamie. His friend Tyler is currently in second place. I can't lie, Tyler. I'll apologize now. I was rooting for Sir Zahid to finish in first purely because I wanted to say Fradiola Farteta 11. And the only thing better would have been if like the Roman numerals were wrong. If it said like 14 or 9, that would have been even better. I'd actually give Sir Zahid a little bit more credit. But the teams that they both put out were really, really impressive because a lot of people can find their way high up a scoreboard on week 1 by triple captaining the right player and just saying, I want to be as high after week 1 as possible. But these are both just standard starting 11s that were smart enough to play Mo, Mitrovic, and Kulusevski.
Mm-hmm.
One thing you will notice here quickly when you look at that leaderboard is you don't see a single person from American Scouser TV on there. How do we know this? Well, we know this because we at American Scouser had our own private head-to-head league. And in that head-to-head league, we show that we really don't know that much about fantasy football. So we appreciate that you reached out again and watched another episode. But in all seriousness, this is one of the fun parts about head-to-head fantasy football, Mateusz, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things, looking at the scores here, we have a couple players like myself who, if I would have gone up against 8 other people, I would have lost this head-to-head. But I kind of had that luck on my side this time, and who knows? I mean, next week I won't be so lucky, but it adds an extra little level to the fantasy. It kind of, if you're having a tough week, you can at least look to this head-to-head. And when I looked over and I saw Kazi was where he was at, it made my week a little better because I was thinking who could have had a worse week than me, and if it's Kazi, then I mean, so be it.
Yeah, I was gonna say it is fun to throw a little shade at Kazi's way. Purely for the fact that his name is right up there and the squad selection isn't that bad, and he just absolutely got ravaged. And that's how this game works. Like, you have players that play, you have folks who don't. I lost a late kind of nail biter. The goals by Brentford against Leicester killed me against Jamie. I needed Ward to keep that clean sheet, maybe even get some save points. And as soon as Brendan Rodgers went Brendan Rodgers, I knew that my week was over. You know, always good when I outscore the wife. I figure it's 1 week, so I might as well brag about it. But I'm pretty sure I bragged about it last week and last year in week 1, and then I got absolutely destroyed the rest of the way. But you know, there were lots of close scores all the way across the board, but we would be remiss not to mention that 2 of my Monday night podcast hosts were pitted against each other in week 1, which is kind of like the supercomputer. If the supercomputer threw up, you know, United and Liverpool playing in the last match of a season or the first match of a season. So Timuchin took down Paul, and Paul is bitter about this, primarily because he's Paul, and also because it was Erling Haaland that did it, and it really bothered him. So with that, we transition away from our league at this point, and let's actually take a look at last week's first original roster that you put out. So we shared our sides last week. I'm pretty sure you made 8 more changes after you talked about your team. And I'm just kidding.
I mean, it felt like
talk us through what happened and talk us through your feeling about it.
Feeling not so great. Originally I had Haaland in there. I was also flirting with Zinchenko. I had Martinelli as an idea as well, kind of thrown around. I think once we confirmed that Ward and Iverson were going to be the lesser keepers, everything sort of changed for me, because all of a sudden you have 2 $4 million keepers that you throw up there. And it doesn't matter, some people still went with better keepers, but at 8 million for a starting keeper, it's got to be one of the best moves of the game. And I don't think I will say this, especially with anyone else who's kind of in my position. I don't think what I did was wrong. Like, I'm not stressing out about what happened. I'm not panicking, because the decisions I made were good decisions. It just happened to not work out in my favor, right? Like Tottenham scoring 4 goals and Kane not being part of one of them. That doesn't happen, or it hasn't happened for several years. You have Perisic, who was talked about starting and playing. He didn't get a run out until the last 20 minutes. It happens. You had Trent and Robbo up against Fulham, giving up 2 goals. Like, that doesn't happen typically. And you had Frank park the bus against Chelsea, and Chelsea's attack looked horrible, and they couldn't produce anything. So, looking at my decisions, I made decisions with the right idea in mind. I just, of course, if I'd go back, I'd still bring in Haaland instead of Kane. But I mean, at that point, it's one of those things where you have to kind of be okay with what you decide, because ultimately it could have gone the other way, and who knows? So that's kind of what happened overall. I just kind of got into my head a little bit too much and made some last minute moves. Took Trippier out for Perisic as well. Took Martinelli out. So, it happens, but there's a long season, so I'm not too worried.
Yeah, I feel for you on the Perisic one. I have him in my lineup too. We have very, very similar teams by the time how it actually kind of rolled out. I think the bigger issue, obviously your Kane to Haaland move was a tough one. That happens. I think you can't second guess yourself. You just have to stay with your strategy. The one thing I've realized, and I really like your De Silva pick, I wanted to pick him myself as my 4.5 mid, but I was afraid he wasn't playing enough. And then to see him come in and score the goal, I'm starting to think he may start the next match, or maybe hopefully start the following match. And if he does, I'll really think about bringing him at some point. I just can't risk a transfer this early in the season over a player at 4.5 million. It's just probably not the area in which I want to see that move be made.
Right.
So if we take off your player or your team there, and we will go ahead and take a look at the team that I made as my first week. And it was not as successful as I would have liked it to be, though I don't really dislike the players I have.
Mm-hmm.
I went a little different from you in the stance that I don't love Leicester's matches enough to play Ward every week as my keeper.
Sure.
So I spent the extra $500,000 to have a rotation option. And I found that there were a few different options in there. Um, Meslier for Leeds, obviously Sanchez. They were my two favorites. I am bullish on Brighton, and I really like the side overall. I was
Mhm.
actually excited, and it pains me to say that, when United scored that own goal, only because I didn't have to hear United fans cheer on any one of their players as being great and amazing. But at the same time, I wasn't going to have to look at Sanchez having like a 9+ bonus point week and
Right.
sitting on my bench while I have a 1 point goalie in the net. So Sanchez is going to play a lot for me moving forward. I did have Holland. I won't lie. The only reason I did it, and we'll get to it later when we talk about like our strategies for this week and what we're planning to do. I wanted Kane for week 1 and moved to Holland. And thank goodness I didn't, because of the price changes, it wouldn't have happened. Because I never make transfers until later in a week, though price changes do cause a problem. I've never seen them be this volatile this early. I,
Mhm.
like you, who would think that Alexander Arnold and Robertson would each get a point. Perisic would get a random sub. But I can see a time this year when that back four gets me 45 points in one game week. And
Absolutely.
I'm not going to go away from my big at the back. I'm not going to jump off Salah or Mount. I was, smart enough to keep Martinelli in my side. And I'm also smart enough to know that Gabriel Jesus is going to score a lot of goals for Arsenal just because he blanked in game week 1, people. You don't jump off a horse that quick.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this: I have worries about my bench not having enough if one of these players doesn't play. You know, if
Sure.
Perisic hadn't played, I would have got a 0 because Nico does what Nico does, which is play in a side that gives up 2 goals because he's not that good at defense, and pick up a yellow card because he's not that good in defense. I'm starting to think that 4 million might actually be wasted, and I need to pay attention if there's a better option at a 4.5 defender, and maybe even dropping somewhere else, inside my team. Bailly to De Silva sounds like a good plan as
Mhm.
soon as De Silva's starting. So,
I think the only
not
thing
proud of
that
my result.
I think the only thing that worries me about De Silva potentially is with the signing of Damsgaard, because who knows how Brentford's going to line up now, adding that piece in there. So I think it's one of those wait and see moments. As much as I want De Silva to do really well, they're bringing on another player that could potentially play in the same positions that De Silva plays already. So we'll kind of see how that shakes up. That would be my only concern with that.
So, as we move off of our teams, let's talk a little bit about the team of the week. And for anyone who's new to this game, obviously, each and every single week, there is kind of a Kings of the Week or whatever the advertising slogan is that they're utilizing, but it's the team that scored the highest valued points. Now, this is an interesting one because if you actually fielded this team, you'd be in first place of this game overall, and it qualifies. Many times a team has a great week and there'll be 5 Spurs players up there, and you're like, well, you can only have 3 of them.
Yeah.
So this is truly the team of the week. Um, Anyone on here that jumps out at you, and let's move past the defensive midfielders that scored goals in Jorginho and Lerma, and really focus on the kind of the skill position players that you might actually rotate into your team. Um, what jumps out at you when you first look at this as the high score team of the week?
Honestly, now looking back on it, I don't think there's anything specifically that jumps out. Just because, kind of going back to what you were saying, Jorginho got a penalty, like it is what it is. Pascal Gross seems to destroy Man United every time they play against each other. So that looking back on it, that seemed expected. Kulusevski with Richarlison being out, I know that there was a lot of talk about Kulusevski, and there was the whole: do you go Kulusevski and Holland, or do you go Mount and Kane, kind of to have some sort of Spurs play in there. And then I think the biggest one that jumps out at me would be Mitrovic, just because you don't expect a guy that scored 3 goals all season 3 years ago in the Prem comes up, scores 2 against Liverpool. Yeah, arguably the best defense in the league. It's one of those rare, weird games that just happens, and it's part of the sport. I think Newcastle had a great opening fixture. I was kind of hoping it would be Trippier on that side and not Schär, but I ended up not going with Trippier anyway. So I think Newcastle will have some decent defensive options this year, depending on the fixture list. They have a couple tough ones coming up now, but after that, there's a good 3 to 4 game stretch where it'll get pretty interesting to see if there's good value there. And yeah, I think everything else. I think Holland. I'll only say I'm a little surprised by his brace, only because I went with Kane and was not expecting. I thought maybe he could contribute to a goal. Didn't expect him to come out with a brace. But overall, looking at that team, that's kind of what I see that jumped out at me.
Yeah, I would say shame on me for picking the wrong 8 million midfielder. I was heavy on Kulusevski, especially when I couldn't get Son or Kane in my team, and I decided to start with Holland.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really between Mount and Kulusevski for me, and I went with Mount because I thought he had the better long-term fixtures. And honestly, I also thought he took 3 penalties during preseason, so I thought he was actually back on penalties for Chelsea. And then they give the ball to Jorginho in that stupid hop and skip and a jump. And for anyone that knows this, has listened to the podcast, they know I watch international soccer and I root for basically the United States, then Italy, then Ireland, which basically means that most times I'm failing on all 3 fronts, except for when Italy's good. And Jorginho single-handedly kept Italy out of the World Cup by missing 3 penalties. So to have him then step up on week 1 and take a penalty was just a big, big, big kick in the nuts.
Yeah.
So seeing his stupid Chelsea 3 jersey on the screen is a little irritating. But Pascal Gross, and honestly, I've missed on Schär for so long. Like I've said for a while how good he is, how much he offers. At times he takes set plays and set kicks and direct free kicks. He scored goals as a defender, and that's the number one thing. Do I think Lloyd Kelly will have 12 points again this year? I don't, because I'm not sure Bournemouth will keep another clean sheet. I am sorry, Cherries fans. If you listen to the shows, you know what I feel about you. But Zinchenko is not a surprise. I think that was probably, Kelly's pick of the week. Having Zinchenko in her side and not, listening to me like usual was probably one of the smarter things that she did all week long. As soon as that first goal of the year happened and I saw it was Zinchenko to Martinelli, and I literally jumped up in a pub in Key West and was like, Martinelli scored. And my wife looked at me in front of a bunch of other EPL fans and was like, and I got the assist too. And I have Martinelli. And I was like, oh man. And it begins. That's how fantasy football should start. So we talked a little bit here about the team of the week. We've talked about our sides. It's time to talk about the players to watch, the transfers in and out, and more importantly, what we plan to do ourselves come this week with our teams. So we're going to start with the goalkeepers. Is there a goalkeeper at this point, Mateusz, that you have on your watch list? Or are you set it and forget it with your $4.0 million goalkeepers until Leicester goes and buys a goalie that frustrates and breaks your whole system?
I think that's where I'm at. I think with the early wild card this year, it gives me the flexibility to do that. If this was a normal year where I don't have that extra wild card to throw in the first half of the season here, or the first half of the season, I don't think I would be so bullish on having the 8.0 million goalkeepers. If anything, if I need to, I might maybe look at someone like Henderson, just because he's going to get some good bonus points throughout the year, even if Forest give up goals, because he's going to get a lot of saves. He's going to get a lot of shots thrown at him. And I do like the Sanchez pick as well. He's someone that I thought about. But for goalies, I'm the type to really set and forget when it comes to keepers. And right now, I'm comfortable with sitting with Brandon Rodgers' terrible decision making in the second half. So be it.
I am also a set it and forget it keeper guy. A few years ago, I picked a keeper, started the year, I played him all year, and I never switched him all year long. He started every match, and it was fine for me. I like having a keeper and a backup, so if they don't play, you know that you're getting the 2 points, even if the backup stinks. But I kind of am kicking myself, I won't lie, because I have 500,000 wasted at different spots that I could have dropped down, and I
Mhm.
really wanted Mendy, and Chelsea has really good fixtures, and seeing how Tuchel set up makes me think he's trying to win every game or every match this year 1-0
Yeah.
on penalties, like on a penalty. They have no attack. I'm a little gutted with my offensive minded, having Mount, having James. We'll see where that goes, and I may have to make those moves if it doesn't fix quickly, but they have such great fixtures. So from a keeper standpoint, Mendy for me is right up there. And I think Ramsdale, um, the whole purpose for me not having Ramsdale was that I think there's too many better Arsenal assets that you can have. Like I think
Mhm.
Arsenal is a team you have to look at as almost like a double to triple up. If you can get the
Mhm.
right players with the way Arteta's setting them up, the way their fixtures line up, and more importantly, the way that they attack. But we'll get further into the Arsenal discussion, I'm sure, as we talk more on our defenders. So let's move to that next line. Give me a name or two that you're thinking about either for your squad or you think our listeners should be thinking about for theirs.
So I think one that I've been throwing around in my head somehow it has creeped up in there, and I'm considering Kyle Walker. I think might be a decent pick at 5 million. I know before the season started, I was a little high on him, especially at 5 million, knowing that we have that extra wild card in the beginning of the season. Because until the fixture congestion comes into play, Walker's going to have the first 6, 7 starts, and City's fixtures for those first 6, 7, 8 game weeks are going to be good enough, and you're going to have several cleans that you're going to get from Walker there. And if speaking of Arsenal, if Arsenal lines up the way that they have, and Saliba plays the way that he did that first week, he's going to be a great pick at that 4.5. So that's something to look out for. And then if you're looking at that $4 million mark, maybe someone to get off of Nico, someone like Nathan Patterson. I think we saw that Frank wants to have that kind of that three in the back and those two wing backs, and I think Patterson against weaker teams, Frank's not going to sit back the same way he did against Chelsea. Then kind of open it up a little bit, and I think you've got some decent opportunity to let Patterson grow in that sense. So those are kind of three that I'm keeping my eye on, and Walker especially for to bring in for this week, because Perisic doesn't seem like he's going to be playing as much as I thought he would, and then Conte kind of has this fullback roulette now. Same with Pep's midfield roulette, right? We've got Conte now with Sessegnon, with Royale, with Perisic, and it's like who's going to get the start this week. And so I think for the time being, until Perisic is really nailed, someone going down from Perisic, someone like Walker, for me might be the move that I go for this week.
Yeah, I like the shout about Saliba. Anyone listen to the EPL show? That was my actual stud of the week. Like I singled him out as the
Mhm.
best player in the Premier League this weekend because of the impact he had, both for them in the match and for his club. And I think it changes things because honestly, I hate Ben White, but Ben White was a really, really effective right back because of how Saliba was playing. And
Mhm.
if that happens and they have Zinchenko bombing on the left, I think Zinchenko is an easy one. I think you mentioned Trippier earlier.
Yep.
Um, I'm very bullish on Newcastle. I think if things break right and um, a striker we'll talk about later stays fit and healthy all season long, I think Newcastle could crash Europe. Like I think they can storm the castle in all seriousness, and how great would it be for English football if Newcastle found their way back into European football
Yeah.
and the Gordies got to get crazy and drunk on a Thursday night in the Europa League? I mean, it would be just unbelievable for everyone except for the police in Newcastle. But we'll move off of that topic for now. So, and then the last one I think is the 4.5 pick right now. And I'm again gutted that I couldn't convince myself to pick him over the ones I did. I think Johnny at Newcastle does nothing but score fantasy points and do nothing but get no credit. Like all Wolves do is not give up goals. And all Johnny does is get into attack minded positions all match long. Now, they don't score enough for me, but he's a defender who offers a lot going forward. And I think when you're looking in that 4.5 range too, he's another one along with Saliba that could really be the pick. I'll
Mhm.
start when it comes to the midfielders. we both have Mason Mount on our side, and maybe I'm
Not for
just
long.
bullish on myself and I want to just convince myself it's going to be right. But I think Mason Mount right now is the top of midfielders in that 8 million range in the next
Really?
3 to 5 matches. Yeah. His attacking assets are, his talents on the pitch in real football aren't questionable, in my opinion. I think he's one of the most complete English players in the entire league. He does everything. He can play in a midfield three, he can play in a front three, plays with his left foot, his right foot. He seems like a good guy, hits a free kick, hits a corner, and then pops up and scores a big goal. And, if he lined up in red at some point of his career, I would never complain about it because he seems like the type of guy I'd want on my side. That being said, Chelsea's overall toothlessness makes me nervous. But if anyone can create a goal or pop up and score a goal, I feel like it'll be him. So, and the way that their matches fix out, I think it's a really good one. My second pick is Kulusevski because I think buying into Spurs attack at 8 million is unheard of. I think Richarlison will be a impact sub for at least the first half of the year until after the World Cup. And at that point, maybe Conte will start to toy with almost playing all 4 of them at once. But until then, I think he's going 4-3-3 or his 5-3-2-1 that converts to a 4-3-3 as soon as they have the ball. And more importantly than anything, I think he smells blood right now, and I think he thinks he can get up there in the top of that table. And if he can convince the Spurs side or management that they're a player or 2 away, in addition to what they've already bought him, I think he'll win a Premier League title with Tottenham, which is crazy because I think he's honestly the most serial winner in all of world football. Yeah. He just goes places and he wins short term and then he leaves. Yeah. And I almost feel like this time he might not leave because they're actually acquiescing to him more than anyone that ever has. So I think the Kulusevski one. And then lastly for me, my third midfielder in the low end is the young American at Leeds. I thought Aronson was the best player on the pitch for Leeds. I thought Leeds had one of the most impressive results by going down at home, and they could have folded and been like, this is us all over again. They scored 2 goals. They created like 16 opportunities, and Aronson was involved in like 8 or 9 of them. He did everything to create both goals, and I think that he actually – I've said this for a long time. I think he's the most talented American player that's gone to Europe probably since Dempsey. Like, he's that good. McKennie's probably the best player overall. Yeah. But I think Aronson actually has the flair to be a player that America doesn't normally produce, especially produce from its own like youth academies and ranks, which is kind of cool. So yeah. I won't lie. I'm probably going to bring him in at some point purely because I'm rooting with my heart. Paul, just mute that.
I love the Aronson shout. He was someone that I even considered last week. I think we were talking about it and mentioned, Leeds. Like if they can play the way Marsh wants to play, and we kind of saw a little bit of that this past weekend. And if he's going to be creating as much as he's creating, then someone like Bamford in the future could be a decent pick to get back into your team like he was a couple of years ago, right? So I love the Aronson shout. I think he was absolutely great. Someone that I feel like we don't need to mention, but need to mention just in case you still don't believe it or believe in him is Martinelli. He's still only 24% owned. So that's someone at 6 million to get part of that Arsenal offense. That's a great pick there. We kind of saw the funniest thing was he missed the clear-cut opportunities he had, and he nailed the one that kind of just came out of nowhere, and he was just right place, right time. So he's going to be part of that offense. He's going to be around those returns all year. And at 6 million for his price there, it would be a great get. Someone else more towards the lower end. I know that we talked about him before too. He was pretty highly owned before the first week, but Andreas Pereira, if Fulham plays the way that they want to play and they stick it to any team they play, doesn't matter if they're Liverpool or Man City or if they're Leeds or if they're Southampton, then Pereira will have some decent returns throughout the year, linking up with Mitrovic up top. So I think from a midfield standpoint, those are a few names that definitely popping out for me, at least this week. I am flirting with the idea of changing out Mason Mount, kind of a short-term fix, because I think I want to be part of the Man City offense going forward for these next few weeks. So to me, it's kind of coming down to, do I go for Kyle Walker? Do I go for someone like Phil Foden? The problem with the Man City midfielders, as we all know, for the last few years, we don't know who will play and how long they will play for. But I did like what I saw from Foden this past week, and I think he's going to get more of an opportunity than Mahrez or Silva, because it looks like Silva might be on his way out. But it's one of those things where I think I would like a piece of that City offense without paying the price for Haaland, even though it's dumb. Just do it. If you don't have Haaland, just get Haaland. Just take the hit. Honestly, I know we're going to get to it, but just do it. I should have done it on Sunday before the price rose. I didn't, because I was like, no, it's fine. Kane will be fine. No, it's not fine. You guys just go for Haaland. Just do it.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea. Kelly got bounced out of it too, because I taught her not to make transfers, and she wanted to make it Sunday morning because she's like, "Isn't that my plan? I'm going Kane to Haaland in week 2." Mm-hmm. And then literally I was like, "You don't make a transfer before the match happens." Remember when I did that time and the guy blew his knee out like halfway through the match? And I was like, well, now I'm screwed. But you wait till that night and you don't pay attention, and you wake up Monday morning thinking it's fine. And Haaland goes to 11.6 and Kane goes to 11.4, and you're 0.2 tenths or -4 points to make that move. Yep. So for me, I will tell you this on the midfielder shouts. I think they're all really great. I like the idea of your move of getting off Mount. I question Foden, Mahrez, all of them. I question every City midfielder because it's just pep roulette outside of KDB. And I also think that what we saw with that tactical shift, and I mentioned this during the EPL show when we were doing our recap of the match of the week, which was West Ham versus Man City. I struggle when I start seeing Pep tinker with these midfielders coming inside. I start thinking that there might be a formation that allows for Rodri and Phillips to play together, where Phillips goes a little more forward, plays sort of as an attack, and they play with these 6s and like 2 6s, 2 8s, and then Rodri dropping into a back 3. But I think that could take one more attacking player off the pitch, but still give you just as much impetus going forward. And I think that allows him to balance and play with like Cancelo as more of an attacking midfielder. So it could help the Walker shout, but it could actually hurt the Mahrez, Foden, Grealish shouts. Yeah. So, and I'm with you totally. We're going to talk about forwards, and we're going to have a whole segment where we don't talk about Erling Haaland. So before we get there, can we all just acknowledge that missing that shot at the end of the Community Shield that didn't mean shit, but we thought it was really great, probably made that kid get a little angry and get a little hungry, because when he broke in on goal and took that penalty, when he picked up the ball, and Gundogan and De Bruyne were on the pitch, and he didn't even look down. He just walked over, put the ball down, and it was like, and then he took arguably the best penalty I've seen taken on a high-pressure situation. And I hate the celebration, but I have to admit, the player is fun to watch. And I wish he wasn't at City, as long as he's not at United. But the Premier League is better. The Premier League, and so is Premier League fantasy football, is better because he's in the league.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
So as we go to the forwards, talk to me about your 2 or 3 forwards you're keeping on your watch list, you're thinking about bringing in, or someone you might want to work with going forward.
Yeah, so, I think kind of take a little different route on this. I see a lot of people, and you mentioned earlier, transferring out on Jesus, kind of giving up on him so quickly. That's not the move right now. He was the most owned player going into Gameweek 1 in the history of the game, and he should still be one of the most highly owned players going into Gameweek 2, and he will be. He hasn't had that many transfer outs, but enough to really talk about saying, hold on, slow down. Just because he didn't give you a return against Palace doesn't mean it's a bad pick. This goes back to the beginning, right? You can have good picks that just don't score well. It doesn't mean you need to panic and then sell out on them because you don't think they're, it's the first week. Anything can still happen. So I think we need to kind of slow the roll down on Jesus being transferred out. Seeing what Mitrovic was able to do, and seeing the way that that he's getting the best out of him right now. I don't know. I think maybe the curse from a few years ago might be broken. He might be able to get some more returns. And at 6.6 million, if you start seeing this shift from earlier when we talked about when a lot of managers, they're very defense heavy, very wanted to do 5 at the back, right? 4 at the back, because there are a lot of good options at the back. But if we start seeing these forwards like Mitrovic and Holland and Darwin and Callum Wilson, if they start playing the way that they can play, we might start seeing a big shift where we start seeing a lot more attack-minded teams coming out there again. Because last year and maybe the last couple of years, there wasn't much really to write home about up top. So I think it'll be really interesting to see that evolution of how we are kind of going to look at this season and see if, that shift from the whole defensive minded aspect to the whole forward attacking aspect. So then, in talking with that, for us, I think the prospect of Darwin Núñez is very exciting. We just don't quite know yet if he's going to be completely nailed on as well. I mean, we know that they're going to come out against Crystal Palace completely on all cylinders. Hopefully, they're not going to want to sit back after this draw against Fulham and kind of let Palace come at them the way Fulham did. And so a lot of transfers in for Darwin Núñez for that fact alone, that even if he comes on as a sub, he can still change the game. And we saw that he had the best performance when it comes down to the minutes out of anyone else in the league this past week. So those will be really, it'll be fun to watch how that kind of transitions from the whole defensive minded to the attacking minded aspect of it.
Yeah, you talked about all 3 of mine. So I'm going to say this. My guy I mentioned earlier was Callum Wilson. I think Callum Wilson is an absolute player that every fantasy league member should be paying attention to. You have to watch his minutes, you have to watch his health, and you have to pick the spot. But that Newcastle team, and Eddie Howe has proven that he knows how to get the best out of Callum Wilson. He made him a Premier League player when people didn't think he was one. I mean, they came up from the championship. He had the bad knee injury. He didn't play the first year. And when he came back the second year, they were like, I can't believe you're going back to a championship striker. And he was like, we wouldn't be in the Premier League if it wasn't for this championship striker. And then the guy was, arguably one of the best strikers. Him and Josh King were, an outstanding tandem that pushed Bournemouth, I think, to 8th or 9th in the Premier League, which is crazy when you play in a ground with less than 30,000 supporters and you have less than like 150 fans. But the truth is about Bournemouth and all these different sides, it doesn't matter in fantasy. That's the key. You're looking at matchups and overall key factors. And I think with Wilson, he gives you the factor that he's nailed on starter, and you know that if he gets opportunities, he will score goals. It's whether he can stay healthy. I'm not taking the cheese on Mitrovic because it was a soft penalty that was rightfully awarded, by the way. It was a foul, and if Mo Salah goes down there, we're all screaming if he doesn't get a penalty awarded to him. Did Mitrovic sell it? Of course he did. And then he buried it. He has, 2 less goals from open play than he did in all of 2 seasons ago. And until I see some more goals from open play where he's not going up against a flat-footed right back who doesn't want to jump for a ball. He bullied a kid, basically bullied a child in that moment. He's not a child. He's the best right back in the world. But at that moment, he basically bullied a kid into a goal on a broken play and then scored a soft penalty that he slotted himself. So Fulham is still arguably attached to all these different strikers, which means I don't even think they're sold yet that Mitrovic can score enough goals at this level. And I will not lie, I am jaded by being in a huge match once in fantasy football that would win a head-to-head league when Mitrovic played for Newcastle, and that son of a bitch got sent off 3 minutes into the game. And I took a -3 that lost me the entire season. So anyone who's listened to the podcast knows that Gally can have a gripe and Gally can hold a goddamn grudge. And if you think that shit gets ruled over by 2 goals against your side when flying back with an 11-hour delay and a flight that costs you $1,100 extra to come home from Key West, honestly, because they cancel all your flights. And you know what, American Airlines, go to goddamn hell. I'm going to get this out now. Me and Mateusz did that last fantasy show from the beautiful confines of Key West, and I was a happy, glowing, tan human at that time. By Saturday morning, I was an angry person because I was allowed to watch the entire Liverpool match, which also meant I had to watch the entire whole goddamn Liverpool match. And then it cost me $1,100 more to get home because you canceled so many flights. And on top of all that, Mitrovic is the bastard who did us in. I'm not having it. So he's on my list, but I'm putting a huge warning to all fantasy football players out there. Don't take the cheese. I think he's still Alexander Mitrovic. At the end of the day, he'll just let you down. Nunez is a great shout. I think you have to look at him, but I think until he's nailed and started, you can't have a $9 million guy hoping he comes in and makes, massive impact off the bench. Yep. So we're going to wrap it up with this, Mateusz. It was a fun 4th episode. Hopefully our supporters and fans of this show are starting to understand kind of how the flow will be and what our overall approach is going to be. What is your plan for your team for this week?
I say this now, just like I said last week, that I was pretty set on it, and then I made 8,000 changes. My plan is, at the very least, you know what? I'm taking a 4-point hit this week. That's what's going to happen. I'm bringing in Kyle Walker and Haaland, and I think it's an important thing to note. Taking a hit isn't bad. The best managers in the league take some hits here and there. You can't look at it from the perspective of, I'm going to take a hit this week, I have to get X amount of points, because the moves that you're making, don't take a hit for a 1-week move, right? Make a move, if you're taking a hit, that's going to last you for the next 4, 5, 6 game weeks. And now with this in mind, I'm thinking I'm going to ride Walker and Haaland out till game week 7, 8, and then do the wild card whenever I'm ready to do that, and then go from there. So I think that's going to be the move. You're going to see me with a 4-point hit next week, but I'm going to have Haaland and Walker, and Haaland's going to bang in 3 against Bournemouth, or Scott Parker parks the fucking bus and Man City squeezes out a 1-0 win, and it's Rodri that scores from outside of the box, and that whole thing was a disaster. But again, looking forward, I think right now I feel a little bit more comfortable with Haaland than Kane. Even though I don't think sticking with Kane is a bad idea. I thought about it too. It's not the end of the world if you don't stick with Kane, but it's just the prospects of Haaland and the City fixtures is just too good to pass up. I think that's where I'm at right now. It's just too good to pass up.
Yeah, I don't blame you on the move. I don't love Kyle Walker, but I understand your rationale for getting into City's defense at that cheap.
Or
I think at this point, I think it's worth it, actually. Walker offers you a little more going forward, but honestly, Ake might offer you more of a goal threat on set pieces.
Yeah.
I love getting Haaland in. I clearly have him already. I'm going to captain Haaland, which is something odd for me because anytime I don't captain Mo, he scores 5 goals, which is fine. I'm all happy for it, but I think I am going to captain him. And, I'm sorry, Bournemouth fans, but I think you're going to lose, mightily to the sword this weekend and realize that your 2-0 win over Aston Villa probably had more to do with Aston Villa not being that good than you being any good. But I personally am not doing anything, and it'll be the first time I've ever done it. Wow. Yeah, I made a commitment to my team, and that was part of my not having Kane to Haaland move in week 1.
Yep.
I made a commitment going into week 1 that I would not make a transfer in week 2. And here's my rationale. I think Premier League managers come up with these ideas of their squads, and then they deviate from them so quick. And for once, I just wanted to I spent 2 months trying to pick a team. I made some mistakes, but I picked a pretty solid team.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to stay with them for week 2. And here's why. I'm going to have 2 transfers going into week 3. I'll probably take a 4-point hit in week 3 after 2 full weeks of information to actually make a smart -4, to your point, that sets me up for 4 or 5 weeks. If Perisic doesn't start next week, and it doesn't look like he will, why would you when the 2 fullbacks played as well as they did? I'll move him out at 5.5. I'll probably maybe move out one of my midfielders, and then maybe another defender. Depending on how Liverpool fares, I may pop out Robertson. Now I can go to Diaz, or I can, with that information and 3 full transfers in week 3. 2 years in a row, I've made my wild card in week 3 because I've been so broken about my first 2 weeks. And this year I decided I'm going to have 3 transfers for only 4 points in week 3.
That's a good way to look
And
at
I
it.
feel like I can rebuild my team if something's not working. And I'm actually confident in my premiums, Jesus, Holland, Salah. I feel good about them. So if then I need to go Mount to Saka, I can.
Yeah.
Or I need to go, to your point, lower defender to higher. You know, I can make those moves, and I feel like I'll have the flexibility to do it at -4. Will it work? Probably not. Kelly will probably be 35 points ahead of me. She won't do anything. You know, she'll take a minus, 84 and still somehow find a way to score 212 points that week. But that's my life, people. So, as we wrap up this segment, the 5 major ins this week are Holland, Zinchenko, Mitrovic, Kulusevski, and Martinelli. Proud of us, we mentioned all of them during our players to watch segments of players. But the outs, Kane, Jesus, Perisic, Son, and Cash. It's not good for us that we own a majority of those players. Well, for Mateusz and myself, that's going to do it for the 4th edition of the American Scouser Fantasy EPL show. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have comments or ideas, ways we can make the program better other than getting new hosts that are better looking, well, you can go ahead and share those in the comments or send us a message. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can get all kinds of Liverpool-related fantasy as well as Premier League related content. And don't forget to check out our morning cup of coffee or tea, depending on what you drink, which goes live on Facebook and YouTube every single morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central, as we like to say, as in Turkish time. So that's it for us. May all of you have a great week. I hope your players that you transfer in give you big hauls, and you all see green arrows moving up in the table. Here's to week 2.